Hello, Music Multiverse listeners. Welcome back to Beyond Your Radio. This is Unknown Sundays. It's time to talk about another artist, a band, or a collective, or something in the music multiverse that might be relatively unknown to most of our watchers, collectors, listeners, and might see something to be interested in, to find, to a more of a rabbit hole to go down, which comes from the past. It can be from the present as well. Bands that are defunct, still going, changed hands, whatever. Please remember that this is an extension of our article section of beyondyourradio.com. And I write these articles there for Unknown Sundays as well as Album Review Saturdays. The links are there to the albums, to the artists, to their website, as well as when it comes to Unknown Sundays, I also put in links to some of their live performances or other things that might be of note. So everything's written there by me. Check it out. Now, sometimes there's a list created before I go on my record store visits. That doesn't happen too often, but when I say it's a list that's kept in the car, and I utilize or bring in when and if I feel I need to. This would not be a usual happenstance, technically, because it only happened a couple of times. Obviously, when you're coming into new genres of music, that's something you'd like to do. You would like to have a certain collective that you want to, something that would give you an easy accessibility. Early artists, contemporary artists that in the genre, like in jazz, let's say, you would go to those contemporaries, the Thelonious Monk, the Dizzy Gillespie, those kind of things to build your awareness and stuff. You don't start with the avant-garde, maybe some early Miles Davis, but nothing of the tune of Bitches Brew. So this happened to me on this particular one. It had to do with basically one of the first lists I created, which you're not going to, it's not going to be of the jazz section. It's going to be of electronica, which started to come into its formation in the 90s. Although I don't give me Kraftwerk was ahead of that in that time, but that's not accessible. That's a hard thing of nature. And that electronica drew me into jazz, actually. So what kind of electronica? Well, downtempo, a subgenre of it, which kind of emerged in the late 90s, maybe the mid 90s, featuring hip hop like inclusions called trip hop. Ambient instrumentals and instrumentalization, and obviously the computer DJ manipulation and sampling, as well as a plethora of vocalists that kind of made their way. Some of them held on tight and kept their and became soloists as well. So the most obvious mention here would definitely be Portishead, Beth Gibbons. When the world didn't end at the beginning of the year 2000, we had Air. We had Athero from Canada. Morcheeba, which recently reviewed her new album on, a couple of weeks back. Hooverphonic, Thievery Corporation, and Saint Germain, which was done on Unknown Sundays 2024. So you can go back and check that out if you so choose to. All of which were on that said list that I talked about. Welcome to 07 on Unknown Sundays as one of those duos that found downtempo expressions from all kinds of reoccurring places and reoccurring vocalists, some of which, well, at least one, became probably more famous than any before or after, and maybe even more so than the band we're talking about. As well as a position of creativity that, while linked to this avenue of electronica, had certain pleasure principle that was unique. The English music duo of Henry Binns and Sam Hardiker, as you would probably assume, were studio engineers prior to this becoming of a band. But this was their intro to music loving. I find this to parallel the singer-songwriter craze of the 60s, if you think about it, where those writers of the songs, despite their supposed non-rocker bad looks and appeal, wound up to stop writing songs for other people that looked great and decided to go out on their own. And they were given that position, people like Elton John. as an example. There's plenty more of them. Henry and Sam were finally able to do just that thanks to the music scene of London. Not so much from the United States, because London does not have that genre manipulation that this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. They always love the club. They're more club than we'll ever be, which isn't a surprise, really. Talk about surprises. This is the list of studio work prior to their debut album, Simple Things, in 2001. In fact, the band's name, 07, was first in print on one of the records I'm going to mention. They did work for the Pet Shop Boys. That's believable. Lamb Chop. I'm sure that could be an Unknown Sunday. Sneaker Pimps. Lenny Kravitz. Young Disciples. Radiohead. They did remix of Climbing the Walls, Meeting in the Aisle, which was done a B-side from Karma Police, and even some sampling for Kid A. And they also did work for Robert Plant. Binns and Hardaker spent time on the Honduran island Utila, which contained a bar named Cerro Siete. After returning to the UK, they were asked by Radiohead to remix that Climbing Up the Walls, which prompted them to come up with a name. Because when you're doing that remix, your name gets on it. And that was the very first time that 07 was ever seen in print. It came on a Radiohead remix. The usual status was to call the mix after your band, so that went on from there. And they decided on the English meaning, of course, not using that Spanish mix, which I think was the right idea. So they got the name of their band. They've got these influx of sounds that they worked on, hearkening to a variety of genres when I mentioned those people and the professionals of the scene. And they have this musical chop and aptitude to now bring about their own creation, which have a DJ-like marker into the club or the, I don't know. But there was no question that, like Portishead, they wanted the music to have an actual soul. And by when I say this, have a soul, this is not electronica by means of computerization and complete computerization. This is the making of instrument. They play. And their uniqueness was definitely the divinity to make sure the music came from an actual instrument, relying heavily on the chord combinations of that and structures between bass and keys, whether it was by piano or whether it was done by keyboard. Of course, it all starts or stems from the track and the beat, but they had, I don't know, they knew they could morph to reality on an actual drum set too, but they wanted the tempo to be more relaxed, more tropical, more cafe-like, while definitely putting more of like a jazz rendering arena into this subgenre. A wheelhouse I strongly prefer, and the one that lets a lot of artistry shine from vocal to bass to unique flavors of soul and even slow bluesy funk appearing. And this will come back around again because, well, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. Now it's the second part of the generous rabbit hole we're here at, which could have easily started another list, which is those vocalists associated with all these cool songs on these albums over the years. Now, they could have been a electronica band, artist or duo that brought in continual different people all the time. That is not the case. They found certain connections with certain artists for certain times and albums and songs, and they worked it in to not only their own schedule, but they also worked it in to the schedule of the artist being in there. So let's venture, right? Because most of these are not going to be known outside the UK. So we've got Sia Furler, Tina Dyko, Sophie Barker, Osmond Wright, who is actually known as Mozez, Mozez, and the tremendously popular now Jose Gonzalez of Sweden. Now, it was not all of these at once, mind you, but you are starting to get the idea here of other bands and the album spans. I started going first to Tina Dyko. the Denmark voice of alternative pop, rock, synth pop, maybe a little indie, hoping to find albums or other band associations, especially after the Home single from the second zero 07 album, When It Falls. Then there's this woman there that no one knew about except the UK in 07. She had been working the industry, and her solo debut album actually came out in 1997. Her sophomore record reached the US in 2002, but it really wasn't until Color the Small One in 2004, which was the first Sia record I was able to purchase, that went to number 14 in the US, while sinking into the hundreds in the UK, where we all got to know Sia. Even though she's been a reoccurring vocalist for 07 since conception, there's only one album she's not on. Playing live with them for years is what she's done, as well as Miss Sophie Barker, who also sang a couple of songs for Groove Armada. She has several solo albums, but I can tell you this, they're not easy to find, and I can't. I don't have a single one. I'd like to go down there and get that, but I think that's going to be a harder find. I might have to cross the pond for that. Sophie Barker's first album is actually a children's album. Now, I'm not going to go into the apeshit bonkerness that I went just this album review Saturday with Tracy Bonham, but again, don't think those should be in your album catalog. And this was her debut, which that's a little bit interesting in itself. But anyway, that's just to let you know. Moses, well, he's another cool enigma, and not to be confused with the band Enigma, which falls into this down-tempo, electronica kind of world. He's got an interesting catalog kind of that hovers into the instrumental sounds and how they react to the minimalism, vocal intersections, a soulful kind of approach, which sometimes works for me and sometimes seems a bit like they're trapped in a musical quicksand in some of the more present albums. The first album, though, Lights On, that definitely follows the guise and intricacies of 07 throughout most of the record. So he was deeply influenced by that, I believe. It's the right thing to do. It certainly didn't have a lot of down tempo, but it did. But as I played back their later albums, it did seem that the duo were kind of starting to release themselves to pushing the early tempo to an upper register and rhythm, which started heavily on Yeah Ghosts, which is their album from 2009, kind of carrying on into the Simple Science EP in 2014. And there's this other EP, and I don't remember what year it is, but I don't remember the name of it. But I recall them having a bit more push, and I don't like that because in the speed of that upping the down tempo and leaving down tempo, repetition starts to swell. Just my opinion. However, when they get to the last record, The Garden in 2019, we are back to a different down tempo with the folkism of the fabulous Jose Gonzalez, which, I mean, I have several of his records too, solo-wise, which kind of extends them into an acoustic session, even on the deluxe version of this record. So I highly recommend the deluxe version of this record. In fact, I will go to say that this album utilizes Sia on a lot more tracks than any other album, kind of like it's the two of them going back and forth, Jose Gonzalez and Sia. And I think they found that these were the two that made the sessions soar. Today, the words don't mean enough for us to say, for us to say. While it still is not my number one record because of my stubborn nostalgia for simple things, let's face it, it is easily number two. It would be a tough battle among the electronica groups of these times and eras for supremacy in my audio library. Portishead is a giant in that for me. 07, of course, Thievery Corporation, Groove Armada, Air, the French band, they're excellent and they have their own swagger and groove. Nightmares on Wax, another one, and Massive Attack. You could even throw Delirium in there, which artists came into that one as well. So most of these groups mentioned share a moment in the Azuli record spotlight as like a variety of artists put their trip hop staple or their spin or their genre spin on these particular artists. And I believe it was centered around this type of music. And I don't know why, except to explain it that this type of music seemed to have this frown on it. A lot of 70s, 80s, 90s rockers and that, or producers and stuff like that were probably pretty pissed about the electronic scene. Hell, you guys know from our panelists that it's not a favorite of the record salesperson, Jeff Crichton, on our show. So these were called late night tales or another late night, depending. I think the other late night means that they had a second one, and there were some that had seconds. The tracks on the albums are selected and mixed by diverse selection of artists asked by Late Night Tales to create the ultimate late night mix. Many of these albums end with a story track read by famous English performers, including Benedict Cumberbatch. Now, of the groups mentioned above that I name dropped, the first to have Late Night Tales, in fact, is 07. And their treatments, courtesy of Don Blackman, a funk pianist who worked with Sting, Mary J. Blige, Tupac, and Jay-Z, not to mention the stuff he did with Earth, Wind, and Fire as a sessions musician in Parliament and Funkadelic. I think Quasimodo's on that record, and the Cinematic Orchestra, along with others. There's even one band from the 70s again, so a lot of soul. And that's where I'm getting to you, that they're still doing these kind of albums today, which go off on from Electronica Reservation to primary artists like the Flaming Lips, Snow Patrol, Khruangbin, as well as Olafur Arnalds, a classically trained pianist, composer, soundtrack aficionado. So when people knock the electronica, I get pissed. When they say it's just computers and samples and mixings, watch the live videos on our article section. Check out these musicians at the instrument. Yeah, there's a DJ principle that's in here, but that is live piano, horns, bass, guitar, along with drummers. They're all swaying, tempo managing, while an influx of melodically interesting vocalists take the stage, take the helm, and give lyrical structure and placement and vibe, much like that of Morcheeba. They stick to groove, undertones, and a chill delivery that can live in any moment, whether it's a live session or emotively impressed at every turn of a song or the entire album or the entire catalog. The respect for their creativity and their overall addition to the varied downtempo genre they are part of is world-class, mixing that hip-hop, jazz, and DJ chill experience, and they reach from that Honduran bar scene to a tropical cafe to being there at Glastonbury. They go to record stores, too. They're there. Staples. Reaching from that, you can even say they date that far back and taking it to even Radiohead. Electronica didn't ruin music. It is an extension of the world's music, uh, processes and soul-filled expressions created that were created um, from the minds of musicians with great talent, ear, and conceptual designs for this that span generations. They span vocalists and instruments, bringing us to the fabulous rabbit hole of genres, musicians, and creators, much like that of how it happened from the blues. 07 albums. In 2001, they debut is Simple Things. Simple Things was actually remixed to a couple years later in 2003, giving other spins from some people. Not a full held album. Then we had When It Falls in 2004. Then it came to 2006 with the release of The Garden. Now, those albums, I have them all. Then we get to Yeah Ghost, 2009. This is where the tempo kind of changed. No Saya, none of the familiarity of other artists. This stepped up the tempo. Maybe it fell out of Downtempo if you're an aficionado. This album I don't have. In the Half Light comes in 2024, and that comes actually under the moniker Swim Surreal. This is an artist, I think it's Leonard Thomas. He wrote with 07. He does the singing. It has that soul perspective, but it is not to the past of 07. It has a more DJ complimentive kind of style. Doesn't hit that tropical cafe moment, but it is 07, so it's there. And in the Half Light instrumentals, which just came out in 2025, that holds back the vocal of Swim Surreal or Leonard Thomas. And that has a smaller connection to the past of 07. So what did you think of 07? Are you a fan of the down tempo, or are you just starting out? Well, don't be scared. Dip your toe in. There's plenty to do. Did you know that was Saya when you heard those records? I'm guessing probably not. It's something I've come to a realization back in the day. So much to explore probably for many of us, but did you take a look at some of the other projects here that I just mentioned? And did you know Jose Gonzalez? Please comment, leave us a note or two. Like what you like, leave what you don't. There's no sense in hitting the dislike button because you don't like the artist. The dislike is saying you dislike the video. So just be aware of that when you're doing this. If you do dislike the video, please, if you hit the dislike button, tell me why you disliked it, because I would certainly like to rectify that. I'll see you next week for Todd and his ever-changing world punk band collective on Unknown Sundays. Of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, and because I don't want you to miss a thing. We're on the web at beyondyourradio.com. We're at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We got articles. We got videos. That podcast might start in July. Albums, bands, artists, it's anything we can get our hands on. Go Beyond Your Radio. That's a real music appreciation channel. As always, thanks for watching. Happy listening.